Hello, I'm Pastor Todd from West Lonsdale Baptist Church, and we're so happy that you've chosen to listen to this podcast, which features this week's Sunday sermon. We hope that you find in it hope and love. We hope that if you have a relationship with Jesus, you find encouragement and growth. If you don't know Jesus, we hope that through the words that we speak on Sundays, you will find relationship with Him. Because above all else, Jesus loves you, gave His life for you, and wants relationship with you. Listen now to this week's sermon from West Lonsdale. Well, good morning. It's so glad to see all of you here today. We are excited that you're here, and we had a great day yesterday. If you weren't here, you weren't able to be a part. We had a fantastic time at our block party. We had some good friends from our neighborhood out, and we had a foam party. We had a big foam pit that many of you have seen pictures and video from, kids chasing foam throughout the parking lot. We had Treen in there covered in foam, and it was fantastic. It was a good day. It was a nice kickoff to our VBS, which starts tonight or this afternoon at 2:00, and we're excited about that as well. Ashley's been putting in a lot of hard work for that, and many of you are volunteering and taking part in that as well. That's from 2 to 5 today, tomorrow, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And so we're excited for the kids that are going to be here. We're partnering with our daycare as well, and they're sending over their 4-year-old class to our 4 to 6 age group. And so it's going to be a great week. The theme is Rocky Railway, so we're going to the Rocky Mountains, it looks like, and going to be celebrating there. We got some special friends that are going to be with us throughout the week, and it should be a really, really fun week. I don't know how you feel about Vacation Bible School. I always loved Vacation Bible School as a kid. As a teenager, I loved working in Vacation Bible School. As an adult, I always loved working in Vacation Bible School. It was a chance to take what we do on a weekly basis with our kids and just kind of amplify it and really pour into our children. And I think most of us who spent time in Vacation Bible School can remember key pivotal things in our lives that came from Vacation Bible School. Key scriptures that we learned or key attitudes towards Christ that we developed that came through that time in Vacation Bible School. And it is for our children what camp is for our teenagers. I know that we have students in this room right now, students that are serving in the church right now, that can call on key things that they carried away from camp that have carried with them into adulthood. And so this is an opportunity for us to build that base. The reason for the shrinking numbers in church today is because we are not building a foundation in people. We are just hoping that we catch it, as if we're sitting around waiting to catch a cold, instead of intentionally building foundations in people, starting from a young age as children, but right on up through adults. Here's the thing, adults, your foundation is still being strengthened and built as well. You haven't arrived. You've not arrived. You haven't made it to the station. You aren't getting off the train and saying, boy, that sure was fun. I'm glad I made it. Our Christian walk is not, it doesn't have an end destination here. Scripture tells us that we will not be perfected until we are with Him in glory. And so it's a process. It's an ever-evolving process. But more and more today in the church, we have Christians that are just sitting back and kicking up their feet and going, man, I had a good run. That was good. We're actually talking about that a little bit today in our blueprint of the Hospitable Church. We're actually talking about the attitude of hospitality and service that the church and the individual believer must have for the church to be successful, especially in the world that we live in today. And more it seems that we have an attitude of, I have arrived in the church. I have done my part. I have done my duty. I have checked those boxes off, and now I am done. And we move on. We pass it on. We think of church as in a relay race in which the first leg is the senior generation, The second leg is the middle-aged generation. The third leg is the young adult generation, and the fourth leg are the children and students. And we see the church as that race where we're running around and we're passing that baton off, we're passing that baton off, and we're passing that baton off. But the church is not a relay race. It is a marathon in which we all stand side by side and we move forward. And as in any marathon race, there are those who move faster and there are those who move slower. There are those who run and there are those who walk. But we're all moving together. We're not moving in stages. So I need for us as a church to grasp that and to understand that we're standing side by side and shoulder to shoulder, and we're not passing off responsibility. We're transitioning some responsibilities. There are some things that some of you in this room used to do that you can no longer do. That's just life. We reach a point where we can I was running around the parking lot yesterday at that block party, and I looked at Leanne at one point and I said, I was a lot younger the last time we had one of these. Because I hurt right now. Like my feet hurt, my legs hurt, my back hurt. They didn't hurt the last time we did one of these. So there are natural progressions of transition where we say, I can no longer do this, but it's not, I can no longer do this, so therefore I am done. It is, I can no longer do this, so now what is next? What is next for me? How can I partner with those who can do what I used to do and encourage them and bring them along? What are my roles in this transitioning world of church development? And the attitude within which we approach those things will determine the success that we have in being a hospitable church and being a church of growth and a church of success. And so I want us to look this morning at Acts chapter 2. Acts chapter 2, we're going to look at verses 42 through 47. Verse 41, we will talk about in just a second, but we're going to begin with verse number 42, and we're going to read through verse 47 today. And it says this: all the believers devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship and to sharing in meals, including the Lord's Supper, and to prayer. A deep sense of awe came over them all, and the apostles performed many miraculous signs and wonders. And all the believers met together in one place and shared everything they had. They sold their property and possessions and shared the money with those in need. They worshiped together at the temple each day, met in homes for the Lord's Supper, and shared their meals with great joy and generosity. All the while praising God and enjoying the goodwill of all the people. And each day the Lord added to their fellowship those who were being saved. I want us to notice something right off the bat here. We hear this phrase, and the early church, the disciples, they all met together and shared what they had, shared everything that they had. And then the next part is they sold all their possessions and they shared the money, right? They gave to who needed to be provided for, right? And we hear that and we go, all right, so this is about money. Right? This is about possessions. This is about giving what I have. Dalton, go back to verse 44 real quick. It says, and all the believers met together in one place and shared everything they had. Now, I want you to notice the progression here after this. It says in verse 45, they sold their property and possessions and shared the money with those in need, right? Yes, we hear that and we go, perfect. Church sold, they provided with money, I just have to give and I'm good to go. But look at the next verse. They worshiped together at the temple each day, met in homes for the Lord's Supper, and shared their meals with great joy and generosity. Go on to 47. And all the while, it's not until we see the phrase all the while that we transition from what they gave to the church. They gave their possessions, they gave their money, but they also gave their worship, they gave their time, they gave their homes. It's not just about writing a check in the church. And the thing I hate talking about the most in church is tithing. I just don't like talking about it. I don't like talking about it. And I get it. I've been told by pastors my entire life, every now and then you gotta have a tithing sermon. And I have probably had 2 tithing sermons in a 31-year ministry career. I've probably given 2. I think that tithing is yours and God's discussion, right? I think it is called on. I think it is requested of us. I think that it is our duty to give. But I don't think I need to guilt you into giving. I think if you're in relationship with God, then you're going to give. And if you're not giving, then that's between you and God, okay? So this is not a tithing sermon. This is the church is about more than your money sermon. And there's a feeling out there in today's world that the church only wants your money. And a lot of that comes through the prosperity gospel that's being preached by a lot of churches in our country. Give to me and I will make sure that you're blessed. Give to me and you will receive. Give to me and your life will be better. Give to me and your health will be better. Give to me and your spirituality will be better. And so the world looks at that and they say, hey, the church just wants my money. The church doesn't want your money. The church doesn't need your money. God is more than capable of sustaining the church on his own. He doesn't need you to do it. He doesn't need your checkbook to do it. The local church needs your check to do it. Right? Like, we need your check to survive and to support. We need your check to progress the gospel. But if God wants it done, he's not going to wait on you to write that check. It's just going to happen. Say, Todd, how do you know that? Because we've lived through lean days here at West Lonsdale. Like, we lived through the days where we didn't know if we were going to make it. We lived through the days that we didn't know if the doors were going to stay open, the lights were going to stay on. Jeff and I were going to have a paycheck to pay our families. We were going to be able to buy Sunday school materials. We've been through those days. And you know what God did? He sustained us and he brought us through in miraculous ways. Not just by you writing a check, but by people that we don't know dropping checks bigger than any of us could write. And just showing up in the mail and saying, hey, by the way, they wanted you to have this. So God doesn't need us to write his check. What he does need from us is for us to give our heart. He needs for us to give our heart, because where our heart goes, we follow. Right? What I give my heart to, the rest of me follows. What I give my heart to, I give my time to, I give my attention to, I give my possessions to, I give my effort to. That's the things that I give myself to, where my heart is. And so it's kind of like a current a girlfriend and boyfriend and an ex-girlfriend and boyfriend, right? For a time being, I poured my heart into an ex-girlfriend and boyfriend. Then we broke up. So I moved on to the new girlfriend and boyfriend. And that's now where I'm putting all my time and effort and money, right? This is in the past, and my heart is now here. If our heart belongs to Christ, if our heart belongs to the church, our effort will be in Christ and in the church. And so the disciples, in verse 41, it says, and 3,000 were added on that day. This is the day of Pentecost, right? In Acts chapter 1, we see Jesus give the disciples a directive and then vanish into the thin air, right? He ascends and he goes away. And we've all seen church plays try to depict that in various ways. We don't really know what it looks like. We just know that it says he ascended, he rose, and then he disappeared into a cloud, and the disciples were standing there just looking up. And then Acts chapter 1 tells us that all of a sudden 2 men appeared next to them and said, why are you standing around? Why are you standing around? Appropriate words for the church today. Why are you standing around? He said he's going to come back when he's ready to come back. Now go to work. And so the disciples went to work. Because in chapter 2, we see Pentecost, right? In chapter 2, chapter 1, Jesus ascends. The two angels say, why are you standing around? Get to work. They say, okay, we're going to replace Judas, right? Because Judas had hung himself. They're like, we gotta have 12. Jesus picked 12, let's have 12. So they go through their own process of picking a 12th. And then in chapter 2, we have Pentecost. And Peter gets up and he begins to speak. And verse 41 of chapter 2 says, and 3,000 were added to them that day. Right? In one day, 3,000 members. Listen, you talk about a logistical nightmare. What are you going to do all of a sudden with 3,000 people? You've got like maybe 120 when we're talking about Jesus' like closest key members, right? His 11 followers that are left, the women that were involved in his ministry, and then an outlying group of disciples. Biblical scholars say it was probably a team of about 100, 120. And all of a sudden they have 3,000 members that they've got to find a Sunday school class for, that they've got to find a ministry position for. They've got to build a staff all of a sudden, right? Because now we got to have a senior pastor, an associate pastor. We got to have a minister of education, a minister of children, a minister of youth. We got to have a missions pastor because we're all fixing to go out, right? Like we're fixing to hit North Africa, Asia Minor. We're fixing to hit parts of Europe. Like we're fixing to expand like we've never expanded before, right? One church, multiple campuses. Here we go, right? And they're just heading out. They're spreading out. They're like, what are we going to do with these 3,000 people? You know what they said? They said, we're going to make them all apart. We're going to make them all apart. I said, what do we do? How do we transition them from being people who were foreign to the gospel to being a part of the church? And so they said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to serve them. And we're going to support them. And we're going to be there for them. And we're going to be hospitable towards them. You think in those 3,000 people, everybody got along? Heck no. There were people sitting in that crowd that probably hadn't spoken to other people in that crowd in 30 years. And all of a sudden, they're all giving their heart to Jesus. And now they're coming down and they've all got to form one church, which, by the way, they had no idea what that was. They had no clue. They had no blueprint. They had no plan, right? Like this was nothing that Jesus had taught them. Jesus had taught them how to follow him. Jesus had taught them how to spread the gospel. He had taught them how to do miraculous works and signs, but never once did he have a how to build a church seminar with them. Never once did he sit down and say, now here's what we're going to do. Here's the structure for the church. You need here, it's got to form out like a pyramid, right? This is all the people, and we're going to build up to the senior pastor, and everything's going to function under that. Never once did he lay out that blueprint. He said, go win people. Go win people and build a church. And they said, okay. And so in its infancy, in its beginning stages, they said, here's what we're going to do. We're just going to be hospitable to people. We're just going to love people, and we're just going to serve them. And then we'll figure everything else out. Right? We'll figure everything else out. We're going to give everything that we have, and we're going to hope that they follow suit. And if they follow suit, then their heart is here. And if their heart is here, we can work with that. We can work with that. And so we see them begin this process of building. And they come with this attitude, this philosophy of hospitality and service and ministry. It is the ground floor of the church. It is the foundation. The footers are Jesus. It supports all the weight. Jesus bears all the load of the church. If the church is not about Jesus, it's just a meeting place, right? He is the footers. And then the foundation that's placed on top of those footers is a hospitality and ministry attitude. An attitude of service towards other people. And the attitude with which we approach that will determine the success and the viability of a church. A church that refuses to be hospitable, a church that refuses to have an attitude of service, is a church that is doomed to fail. It's absolutely doomed to fail. We are not here for ourselves, we are here for others. Remember, John just spent all of 1 John telling us, live in the light of Jesus, love others, right? Nowhere in there does it say, hey, take some time for yourself. And that's a harsh thing to say, because we hear that and we go, well, Todd, how am I supposed to keep serving people if I never take time for myself? Well, let's think about your week for a minute. The question would be more, how much time are you giving to others, not how much time are you giving to yourself? Because I think we'll find that we all take plenty of time for ourselves. I am busy. I'm busy all the time. I told my wife the other day, I was talking about someone else that they were done and they were at home and they were doing something else. And I looked at my wife and I said, boy, it'd be nice to be able to just knock off at 4 o'clock. But that's not the way that my life functions. My life functions, it seems like 24/7, right? It's just go, go, go. And I did that to myself. That's not like, I'm not saying, oh, poor Todd. He worked so hard. No, I do that to myself. But even in that, I watched multiple movies this week, which is my way of decompressing. Right? I went to eat with my wife several times this week. Like, I cooked at home because I enjoy cooking, because that's something that I find fun and that I enjoy. I made a fantastic pasta sauce last night, by the way, from scratch. If anybody would like the recipe, I'll be happy to give it to you after church. I found time to do all of that for myself, right? So the question comes not, do I have time to give to others? The question comes, will I prioritize giving to others? Because I always find time to prioritize myself. But yet God said, love me, love others. Love me, love others. You want to find fulfillment in your life? Love God, love other people, and you will find fulfillment. That fulfillment that you're searching for by pouring into yourself and giving to yourself and all of that, God's already given us a prescription for that. Love others, love Him. And it will bring fulfillment to our life. That doesn't mean don't enjoy yourself. It doesn't mean go do a vacation. That doesn't mean watch a movie that you want to watch. It doesn't mean that you don't do things for yourself. But we need to stop prioritizing self over others. Because when we prioritize self, we will always choose to be comfortable rather than uncomfortable. And the disciples, they found themselves in a lot of uncomfortable positions. They found themselves in a lot of situations where things were not great. They found themselves in prison. They found themselves running for their lives. They found themselves, years ago when I went to Bangladesh, we were in a community, and it was a Muslim village, and we were talking, and my translator looked at me and he said, we need to go now. We were like, oh, okay. And so we started gathering our stuff. He said, just leave it. It's okay. So we grabbed what we could and we took off, and we were like, what's the hurry? And he said, well, you see those 3 men behind us? And we said, yes. He said, that's the imam and 2 other men from the village, and their job is to make sure that we leave immediately. And it was very uncomfortable. Like, when you're in a foreign country getting escorted out of a village by people who very much do not want you there, it's an uncomfortable feeling. And the disciples felt that sometimes on a daily basis. And so we live under this misconception that the gospel is meant to be convenient and the gospel is meant to be comfortable. And that is simply not the reality. It's simply not the truth. The gospel is uncomfortable. The gospel is controversial. And if we're living out the gospel, then we're going to have moments of these moments of tension in our lives. But those moments of tension are relieved when we see God changing lives around us. We go, oh, that was worth it. It was worth it to know that one more person is not going to spend eternity separate from God in hell. That's worth my uncomfortability for a few minutes. That's worth me getting escorted out of a village. That's worth me having someone laugh at me, or having someone call me a name, or having someone walk away from me. And by the way, in 30 plus years of gospel ministry, I can think of 2 times that people were openly derogatory towards me for sharing the gospel with them. 2 times in 30 plus years. So this idea that, I can't share the gospel because they're going to hate me and they're going to talk about me and they're going to do this. Now, most people, if they're not interested, they're just going to walk away, or they're just going to change the subject. They're not going to look at you and call you names and berate you and run you out of the office and throw stones at you and things like that. They're just going to change the subject. So that's it. That's what we say no to the gospel for. A change of subject. But God called us to dive in there. Peter stood up in front of a crowd of thousands that he didn't know and just began sharing the gospel of Jesus, who, by the way, had just been murdered for claiming to be the things that Peter is now telling them he is. And Peter stands up and says, hey, by the way, you know those things that you killed Jesus for? Well, I'm here to tell you that they're true. And you know what happened? 3,000 of them said yes to Jesus in that moment. And then they opened the door of hospitality. So I want you to see 3 things this morning about the early church and how they approached this philosophy of hospitality and service and ministry. within the church. The first is this: the early church, they gave their lives to this idea of hospitality and ministry and service. It wasn't a duty for them. It was a calling. And a lot of us have lost the sense of calling within the church and within our own life. We've exchanged calling for duty. And we've said, well, this is my job. This is my duty as a member of the church. This is my duty as a Christian. We're not called to perform particular duties of service as a believer. We're called to be a believer. It's a calling within us. Look at Ephesians chapter 4, verses 1 through 6. Ephesians chapter 4, verses 1 through 6 says this: "Therefore I, a prisoner for serving the Lord, beg you to lead a life worthy of your calling. For you have been called by God. Always be humble and gentle. Be patient with each other, making allowance for each other's faults because of your love. Make every effort to keep yourselves united in the Spirit, binding yourselves together with peace. For there is one body and one Spirit, just as you have been called to one glorious hope for the future. There is one Lord, one faith, one baptism, and one God and Father who is over all and in all and living through all." We're told in Ephesians, you have been called, and then everything that it lays out is this: you have been called to be a hospitable people. You have been called to open yourselves. You have been called to invite others in. You have been called to support others. You've been called to provide for others. You've been called to be there for others and allow others to lean on you while you lean on those around you. And they said, you know what? We're not going to prioritize that within duty. We're not going to prioritize that within job. This is our life. This is what we're called to. Christ doesn't change a portion of our life. He doesn't change a category of our life. He revolutionizes our life. And he says, I'm calling you to me. You now belong to me. You are mine. Anybody here ever feel like you belong to your job? Like your boss owns you? You're like, man, I can't get away from it. It's like it's everything that I do. Hey, Jesus purchased you with his blood. It was a price that you couldn't pay. You didn't own yourself before, right? Scripture tells us that we belong to this world before Christ. This world belongs to Satan, right? This is his place. This is his playground. And then it says that he purchased us with his blood. He purchased us from this world and brought us into his family. And he said, you are now called to represent this family, to be a part of this family. You are called by my name, so represent me well. Live out the life that I have called you to. And that is not a job, that is not a duty, that is not a practical position, that is a calling on your life. This idea of being hospitable as a church, as a people, that is a calling that has been placed on us as believers. And it's what the first church did. It's how they started. They were like, we don't know what else to do, so let's just bring people in and love on them. Let's just bring people in and provide for them. Let's just bring people in and meet their needs. And let's make sure that they know they're a part. Let's make sure they know they're welcome. Let's make sure that they know that we want them here, and then we want them to adopt the attitude that we have. And we want them to serve. So we see that it was an attitude of their life, not a part of their life. The second thing that we see is this: the early church gave their time. What the precious commodity that it is. The early church gave their time. It says that they gave their possessions, sold them, and provided for needs as they came up. But it also says that they had meals together, that they worshiped in their house, that they gathered together and celebrated and worshiped God, right? It wasn't just hey, I'm going to purge my guilt by giving my stuff. It was, I'm going to give my stuff because there's needs that need to be met, and my needs are met. So I'm going to give my stuff, but I'm also going to give my time. I'm going to give my time. And I'm going to be 100% honest with you. That is where the church is hurting the most today. But let me be more honest with you. That is where this church is hurting the most today. is a reluctance to give our time to the things of God and to the things of the church. We're too busy, too much to do, too many places to go, too many things to check off the list, too many things to check off the box, too many things to get done. I don't have time for that. I mean, let's be honest. Half our congregation doesn't have time to come to worship anymore. They just don't do it. We haven't shrunk. We've just stopped coming because we're not giving our time. We've got other things to do, other things to take care of. We don't have time Monday through Saturday to do them. We have to do them on Sunday. So I got to do other things. Now, that's hurtful. And I'm probably going to make some people mad. And there's probably some people that are going to text me, email me, call me, or just not show back up. And that's okay. That's okay. Listen, if we don't confront the root issues that we're dealing with, we can never get rid of them. I can't get rid of a cavity by brushing my teeth. The cavity's already there. It can only be dealt with by a specific process, right? We can't deal with the failures of the church as a whole and the failures of our church in specific by ignoring the issues. And the early church gave their time. And it wasn't easy on them. You think they didn't have jobs? You think they didn't have families? You think they didn't have things that they had to do and things that they had to get done? Priorities on their list? Listen, they didn't just sit around and go, man, I'm just waiting for the day that I have something to do. Oh, there's the church. Now I have something to do. They had to grow their own food. When's the last time that you had to grow your own food? Some of you have gardens and you're beautiful gardeners, but you don't depend on that food. When's the last time you had to build your own house? Some of you choose to work on your house, but you bought a house. When's the last time that you had to protect your own community from foreign invaders? Probably never. This is a community that we're talking about of people who were busy, but they gave their time. They prioritized their calling, and that turned into their time. Now listen, I know, listen, we have people that are on vacation. They're not here. I get that. We have people that are, we have people that, I know, my watch. We have people who are sick, can't be here. I'm talking about those of us, some of us are in the room. We just happen to be here this week. And I'm talking about those that are making this choice on a weekly basis. Some of us wake up on Sunday morning and see it as an option. We just see it as an option. Some of us hear an announcement at church about an event or a process that's going on, and we look and we go, that's not me. That's not me. And not every ministry is meant for everybody. But we do a lot of things around here that everybody has a role. We can't be hospitable if we're not here. If we're not giving of ourselves, if we're not giving of our time, we can't be hospitable. And I know this sounds crazy negative. And you guys are like, man, Todd's he's just coming at us today. I don't mean to. I love you guys. I love every one of you. The ones that are here, the ones that aren't here, the ones that have left here. But I know this, I see a problem. I see a problem. And if we don't face it, if we don't confront it, then we're doomed. We're absolutely doomed. Because you know what happens when a population in the church decides, not me? The ones who are carrying the load get discouraged and they get tired. And then you know what they do? They filter out the back door. And all of a sudden, an attitude of not me kills the church. It kills the church. I love our church. I absolutely love it. I love the ladies that came out and sat at the registration table all day yesterday. Thank you all. Betty, thank you all for doing that. Betty came out with her hat on, ready to go, right? She was ready for the fight. I love the fact that Treen was in the foam pit yesterday. I love that. Roger sat there and served nachos all day yesterday. He didn't even know, he thought he was handing out hot dogs. And we said, we got nachos and cheese. And he sat there and scooped nachos and cheese all day long, the whole time we were here. I love this church. I love it. I've been here for 18 and a half years. I'm not going to lie to you. I've tried to leave. I've tried. And God said, nope. Nope. Not done. Not done, not done, not done. Not done. And so I stayed. And I've been here. And I've watched. And I've watched us go from 300 plus when I first got here to 80 to 125, 130 to 190, right? We've been all over the place. And I've watched people say, I can't do it anymore, and walk out the back door. I've watched people say, I got to have something for my kids, and walk out the back door. I've watched people say, I got to have somebody in my Sunday school class, and walk out the back door. Okay. What are we going to do? We're going to dig in and we're going to give our time. Because that's what's required for us to be a hospitable church. God didn't call us to be a mega church. He didn't call us to be a large church. You know what he called us to be? An alive church. A church with a pulse. A church with life in it. A church with love in it. A church with hospitality in it. A church that's willing to give of themselves and beyond themselves. And when we tire of that, that's when the church closes its doors. When we say, nope, not going to do it anymore, that's when the church closes its doors. But God has called us to something bigger than ourselves. And so many times, I told a group of teenagers this year at camp, so many times when we hear God's called us to something bigger, we think of some massive event. We think of some major thing. And what he's calling us to is just the next thing. Just the next step. Stop looking for 50 people to walk in the door and join the church. And look for one. Stop looking for a mass group of people to just wander in and go, we've been looking for a church our whole lives, and now we're here and we want Jesus and we give our heart to Jesus. And come to VBS this week and help us see one come to know Jesus. Stop looking for God to do the huge and just look for what he's putting in front of us. And we step in to that space. And when we step in and fill that space, he'll reveal the next space. And then he'll reveal the next space. And then he'll reveal the next space. And we just keep walking. We just keep walking. And we keep giving and investing the time that it takes. And we keep investing ourselves in the calling that God's given us that it takes. And we just keep moving forward. Because that's what the early church did. That's how they were successful. That's how they grew. That's how they built what we're a part of today. Do you get that? What they did in Acts chapter 2 is what we're living out today. 2,000 plus years. They built a foundation on being a hospitable church that's still in existence today. Very few things 2,000 years ago are still around today. But you know what is? The church. The church. So don't we think that maybe we should follow the plan that they built it on? It's lasted for 2,000 years. Let's not go messing it up too bad. Let's just keep following what they were doing. The third thing is this. The early church gave plus their excess. They didn't give out of their excess. They gave plus their excess. We have a flawed conception in the church today that we just give out of our excess, right? When I have time, I'll give it. When I have money, I'll give it. When I have effort, I'll give it. When I have a gift, I'll give it. I'll do everything else, and then I'll give out of excess. It's a flawed philosophy. The early church gave plus their excess. It literally says they gave everything they had and sold it to help those that didn't. And then it says they met in their homes, and they worshiped. And they met outside their homes and had meals and fellowship. Right? They said, we're going to give everything we have. Now, what else can we do? We're going to give everything else we have. What else can we give? And I'm not asking you to go home and liquidate and come in and give the church everything I'm not asking you to do that. But I'm asking you to consider what you have that you can give. Maybe it's money, maybe it's a talent, maybe it's a spiritual giftedness, maybe it's just your presence. Maybe it's just your presence. But what do you have to give plus your excess? What can you dig down and find and say, here it is? And I'm not talking about money. I'm not going to ask you for your money unless it's a specific need. But what do you have that you can give? What can you offer? What can you say, Todd, you know what? I've been holding out on the church. I'm actually a great teacher. I'm actually an exceptional vocalist. I'm actually very talented when it comes to an instrument. I'm actually very good at standing at the door and saying, man, we're so glad you're here. You all know those people that when they speak to you, you just feel like you're their best friend in the world. Right? We all have people like that in our lives. My wife's former youth pastor, Scott Carter, when you have a conversation with him, you just feel like you're his best friend. Like you feel like there's nobody else in the world in that moment. We all know people like that. They just make us feel important. We need you at the door. We need you welcoming people in. Maybe you can cook. We'll find a place, right? Maybe you can lift things. They could use you on Monday morning at food truck, right? Like there's a place. If you have something to give, there's a place for you to give it. And the early church said, we're going to give plus our excess, not we're going to give out of our excess. We're going to prioritize everything else, and then we're going to give you what's left over, God. We're going to give you everything that we have, and then whenever we find that extra change on the floor, it's yours too. Whenever I find that extra change in my life, it's yours too. What I find in the couch cushions, it's yours. What I find left over in the car, it's yours too. What I find on the parking lot, that's yours too, right? It's not just everything that I have, it's everything that I have plus whatever else I can find. Listen, you want to be successful like the early church? That's what it requires. You don't want to be successful like the early church? That's fine. But don't complain that we're not successful if we're not giving what's required of us to give. Because we're not going to be successful if we're not. Gosh, I sound negative today. I don't mean to be negative. But we can't say, man, we're shrinking. Man, where's everybody at? Man, why aren't we doing this? Man, why aren't we doing that? You know what? The things that we put effort into, they've been successful. Food truck, successful. We're feeding families at food truck. They're coming. We're meeting a need, right? That's there. There's effort there. There's commitment there. There's involvement there. That ministry is flourishing. Our senior adult ministry, Betty's doing great stuff, and you all are showing up, and there's success there, and there's flourishment there, and there's fun there, and there's learning there. We've got a group of young people that are getting it done in our recreation outreach ministry. They're doing events, they're planning fellowship events, and you all are coming, and others are coming. Say, man, we don't ever see visitors. Come to pickleball on Wednesday night. They got visitors coming. We have people that don't go to our church that are coming to pickleball. We have people that don't go to our church that go to hikes and do the 5Ks and those things. They're showing up and they're doing that. Now the question is, how do we transition them from there into the church? Well, maybe that's your job. Maybe that's your role. Maybe that's where you're supposed to pick up. I don't know. You know what I do know? It's not my job by myself. It's not Jeff's job by himself. It's not, listen, my job as a pastor is not to do everything. And I know sometimes it feels like that's not the case. Sometimes Jeff and I do everything because nobody else is picking up the load. Sometimes it's because we don't ask. And that's our fault. But my job is not to bring every soul into this church and make them feel connected. That's not my job. My job is to preach the gospel and equip you and prepare you and send you out to do the job of the church. And that means connecting to people, bringing people in, inviting people to come be a part. Not people that are in a church already. Leave them be. Let them be happy. Go find somebody who's not. Todd, I don't know anybody. I call bull. You do. You pass neighbors every Sunday whose cars are sitting in their driveway because they're not going to church. You go to the grocery store every week and the same people are waiting on you, and you never have a conversation with them. There are people at your work that you know good and well did not go to church on Sunday. You just don't want to make yourself uncomfortable. You want to give out of your excess instead of give out of what you got. Listen, I can't fault you. There's times when I'm uncomfortable. There's times when it's not easy. There's times I drive past cars in my neighborhood too that are sitting there every Sunday morning. I'm not fussing at you. I'm talking to you, and I'm talking to myself at the same time. But the early church, they gave everything. Everything. And then they said, what else can I find? What else can I find? That's where we're at. Listen, many of you today, I'm preaching to the choir, and I know that. I know that. It's like when you sit your kids down and you lecture your kids, but you're really just talking to one kid, but everybody's got to sit through it, right? You're like, I'm talking to you, but everybody has to listen to it. When I worked daycare at my home church, my friend Chris and I, we got in trouble all the time. And these memos would go out to all the teachers, and it would say, teachers, you are not allowed. And we were like, listen, guys, she's not talking to you. She's talking to us, right? Like, you guys are doing a great job. We're the troublemakers. But we got to hear it. We got to be reminded of it. Because some of us in this room that have been getting the job done, you're starting to falter, you're starting to get tired, you're starting to get worn out, and you're starting to get down. And you're starting to look around and go, I can't be the only one to keep doing this. And so I want to encourage you today. If you don't do it, who will? If you don't do it, who will? Sometimes we have to shoulder more of the load than we feel we can carry. Because sometimes in our distress, that's when others come to the aid. Others see that and they go, somebody's got to help them carry that load. I'll go and I'll do it. I'll make sure that it's done. I love you all. I love our entire congregation. Those that are here, those that are not here, those that have left. I love them all. I want to serve with you. I am willing to go anywhere with you and for you. But we've got to say we're committed to being the church. Not that we want to be, but the church that God is leading us to be. And living and building in the same way that the early church built the church. We've got to be a church of hospitality, a church of love, a church of service, a church of ministry. Would you pray with me this morning? Jesus, we come to you. And God, I scratch my head as much as maybe you are this morning because I don't know the purpose, Lord. I don't know the reason for the message that was just preached. Maybe it's encouragement to those that are getting done. Maybe it's to scold those that would be listening that maybe feel that they aren't doing. Maybe, Lord, it's just a reminder to all of us what the church is meant to be. God, I don't know. My job is not to know. My job is to preach. And Lord, your job is to interpret in every individual way needed to interpret. So Lord, I don't know. Maybe there'll be 200 of us here next week. Maybe there'll be 3 of us here next week. But no matter the number, the calling doesn't change. It doesn't change, Lord. So God, I pray this morning this. I pray that you would just, the same way you did at Pentecost, God, that took tongues of fire, that you would interpret the message to each heart and each soul in its own individual way. Lord, that we would carry out of this what you would have us carry out of this. Not what we want to carry out of it, not what our heart tells us to carry out of it, not what our attitude tells us to carry out of it, Lord, but what you tell us to carry out of it. And God, may we be strengthened for it. Because Jesus, you've got a job for us to do. So may we be willing and ready to do it. We ask all this in your precious and holy name. Amen. Once again, we'd like to thank you for joining us on the podcast this week as we dissected God's Word from our Sunday sermon. If you would like to hear more, you have an opportunity to listen to a follow-up podcast that I do with Luke Daly called After the Sermon, where we take aspects of this week's message and we just go a little bit deeper. Maybe we broaden the discussion, maybe we dive into some new scripture, maybe we look at some new aspects of it. We'd love for you to check that out. You can find it right here on this same podcast page, After the Sermon, with myself, Todd Halliburton, and Luke Daly. Again, thank you for listening, and we hope that you have a relationship with Jesus. If you don't, he wants relationship with you more than anything. We'd love to help you out. You can find contact information for us right here on the West Lonsdale website, westlonsdale.org. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to see you on Sundays. If you're in the Knoxville area and don't have a church home, worship every week at 10:15. Thanks again for listening.